Hey, so you're going to play Francis Drake. Not really sure what to do? Well, the board game Batcave's got your back. Hang around for a little bit. We'll tell you about the game, what we think of it, more importantly, how to play it. And to get us started, it goes a little something like this. Just sit right back, let me tell you how to play Francis Drake the board game. You need 3 or 4, no more than 5 friends to entertain. An hour and a half to 2 full hours is how long it will take. As you navigate your voyages, there's 3 rounds per game. Yes, it's 3 rounds per game. To win this game, you plunder from the Gulf of Mexico. But before you sail, you'll shop along a one-way street, you know. Yes, there's only one way you can go. But keep in mind when you return, you have to shuffle the tiles of the governor, the admiral too, Francis Drake and the queen, the informer man. There's guns and goods, supplies and crew. It's the Francis Drake game. Never had one lesson. Hey everybody, welcome to the board game Batcave. We're going to do a setup video for Francis Drake. As you can see, this takes up a lot of space. This is a table eater, but we've gone ahead and set the board out and set the main components out so you have an idea of the scope of the game and the space that you need. We've got it set up right now for 4 players. You can play up to 5 on this, but for the setup video, we're just going to set it up for 4. So obviously, you're going to start out with your board. This is a double-sided board. You've got English on one side, German on the other. We decided to go with English this time. So you're going to set out your board, and then next to your board you're going to have a secondary board where you keep all your supply parts and pieces and that sort of thing. So you've got your markers for your silver, you've got your markers here for your gold, you've got your marker for your jewels, you've got all your different goods that you can trade, including your sugar, your indigo, your coffee, and your tobacco. All those items are available to you as you sail throughout the Gulf of Mexico and try to gather these things up. You've also got your supply barrels. The more supplies on board, the further your ship can travel. You've got markers also indicating goods. You've got markers indicating guns, and you've got cube markers indicating crew. Some of the other things that you pull off of your parts board throughout the game, you've got your little dinghy chips here. You've also got a marker for the admiral, and if you are the person who gets to play the admiral, along with that comes the different war vessels that you're going to place next to the ships on your main board. The admiral, the player who pulls the admiral card, gets these extra ships, and he gets to determine where those ships are going to go and how many extra cannons are going to be available when we reach that portion of the game. Also over here is where you're going to find your governor. The governor, similar to the admiral, he gets to decide where your troops get placed to try to defend the forts that are on the land portions out here. So the governor gets to decide where he's going to concentrate his defenses when we get to that portion of the game. So these are all the items that you're going to set up on the supply board, which you want to keep handy. Keep that next to your main play board. The other things that you're going to find on the play board here, you've got to have a marker cube for each one of your characters. Each color is going to be represented. This is going to help you later in the game for scoring. Anytime you are successful at capturing a galleon, you get to move your marker onto that galleon so that you know when you're adding up your points later that you were successful at attacking a galleon. This is attacking a fortress, and then this is actually just attacking a town. and though you get different things for those, but you need to make sure you are marking that as you go. So that's what these cubes represent. Then also you're going to have your round marker. This game is played in 3 different rounds. Each round consists of shopping for goods along this port city here. You're going to go along a one-way street and gather your goods, and then you're going to go out through the Gulf here and try to bring in as much booty as you can. You do that 3 different times. So you've got your round tracker here. Then you also are going to place out your boats. You start out with a smaller sloop, and at some point you can upgrade that to a galleon by moving along your port city here and gathering certain goods that are going to allow you to do that. So everybody, each player of each color is going to have a galleon available for them later on. At some point you're going to try to upgrade your ship to get a larger ship. And the only die in the entire game is a D6, and it's used for the tavern square. The first player who reaches the tavern square is able to add a 1 to whatever they roll on the die, and that's going to determine what and how many supplies he's going to be able to pull out of the tavern. But we'll cover that again a little bit later. We're just talking about the components now, of course. And then each player is going to have a colored disc for your point track. This game, your point track actually just goes around the board itself, and kind of an unusual thing with this game, everybody actually starts with 4 points. You'll see why that is here a little bit later, but so everybody's going to have a marker for their color on the track, the point track as well. You also will notice a lot of other items on each of the characters' areas. Each character has their very own treasure chest. As you're playing the game, if you're lucky enough to gather some silver, some gold, or some jewels, you actually put those into your treasure chest. And it kind of keeps that secret and hidden towards the end of the game. After the 3rd round, you're going to reveal what and how many treasures you have in your treasure chest, and then you're going to get points for that, of course, also. As well as your ship and your treasure chest, you're also going to have your markers for when you start going out and actually sailing out into the Caribbean. Each of these markers has a number on it, and that number indicates who gets to go first. So what's going to happen when we start into the play portion, people are going to put their discs out on the board. They're put them out face down. So you're the only one who knows the priority that you put at that location. Just because I decided to go to this location first doesn't mean I necessarily have to play my number 1 chip. I can play one of my lower numbers, and that might force one of the other players to come in and play one of his higher numbered chips on top of mine, hoping that when we do the reveal, that'll determine the player order. So as they get put out, you actually stack them all on top of each other in the same location if you want to go to that location. And then once everybody has placed their markers out, at some point we're going to flip those markers over and then determine play order in decreasing numerical order. So you'll have those chips available for you. And then the other thing each player is going to have is you're going to have a lot of the little round markers. The round markers are used for the shopping portion of the game, you might say. This is where you're trying to gather your goods that you're going to put on your boat and take out and sail. So each time you're moving along, you want to claim an item. The first item starts out as 1 crew member. The yellow player, being first, would put their marker on the first available spot on this tile and then take the corresponding marker. So the yellow player went first. He landed on the first available spot for crew, and he got 1 crew that he's going to then put on his board. The next player then would be, in this scenario, would be red, and he's going to go. Now the red player has an option. He can either jump and take some crew also, or he could move forward for the next tile, or in fact he could move as far forward along this one-way track as he'd like. Just keep in mind though that you can never go backwards. So if the red player really wanted to get some guns and jumped up here to guns, gathered 2 guns from the supply board over to his board, at no point then is the red player going to be able to go back and use the shipyard or use this crew. He's only going to be able to move forward along this track. So we've got all those items set out. Each player, we're not using the orange player right now, so each player is going to come with their chips, their markers, their cubes all together. Just put those out, keep them separated for each of the players with your board, your independent board that's going to come with your player. Once you've got all those items set out, the next thing you want to do is start preparing the board itself. So we're going to place out jewels. There's always going to be 3 jewels available each round. The way you get a jewel is you have to be the first person to defeat the galleon. You would then take this jewel. If you don't defeat the galleon, the jewel would be available, and the second player in line at that location would have a chance to gain that treasure item. Then you're also going to have your gold items. Those are available by attacking some of the mainland fortresses and cities. So same thing there. The first person that successfully attacks Havana would get the bonus of 1 gold token to put into their treasure chest. And then there's going to be 4 opportunities to get some silver as well. You place those out on each of the corresponding cities. And it's the same thing. First person there is going to gather those treasures. So we've put out our markers for our treasures, either be it jewels, gold, or silver. That's been placed out there. Then we need to go ahead and have markers available for the different trade goods that you can pick up. So we'll put out a marker for our sugar, put out a couple of markers for the coffee. There's 2 opportunities for your sugar, for your coffee, and your tobacco. Now, there is only 1 opportunity each round for indigo. So if you're trying to gather trade goods for points at the end of the game, indigo is pretty important. So then you've got that set out. The last thing that you have to put out on the board for the first round will be the galleons. You'll have 3 markers. One of them is going to add 1 cannon to the defense of this galleon. The other one's going to add 2 cannons to the defense of a galleon. And you guessed it, the third one is 3 cannons to the defense of a galleon. So these are actually, there's only 3 of them, but they're just put face down and then just kind of randomly shuffled up and randomly placed out on the board to each of the galleons. So they're randomly placed at this time. Before you leave port, the player who selected the Admiral card is going to be revealing these 3, and then based on what he sees there, everyone gets to see now what you have. So we'll sort of fast forward to that part, excuse me. So as it turns out right now, this ship ended up with 3 guns, 3 cannons, this one with 2 and this one with 1. So the governor then at that point will be able to put out the additional ships, again face down. He's the only one that has that information at this time. He'll put out the additional ship markers once he knows what the main ships are already carrying, and those won't be revealed until somebody decides if they want to try to attack those galleons or not. So those have been placed out. The last thing to do then before you're actually ready to start round 1 is you need to have an investor card for each player in the game. So we're going to have 4 investor cards, and we're going to put those right here. The investor cards, if you decide to land on this tile and play your investor, you then take this marker, this tile, and put it on your board, and that just shows that you've paid off your investor. The investor is why everybody starts with 4 points. Your investors are backers. They give you 4 points right to start with, but they have to be paid back. So at any point when you decide to pull your investor card, you actually are going to lose 4 points, but by pulling this card and putting it on your board, you're demonstrating that you've paid your investors back, and you can kind of move forward from there. So all 4 players at some point in one of their 3 rounds, they have to select their investor cards. You don't have to do it round 1, but by the 3rd round you have to have pulled off your investor card and paid back your 4 points to your investors, or you can't win the game. So we've set all this up, everything's ready to go for round 1, but one of the big keys of this game, and what makes this game a lot of fun, is once round 1 is completed and everybody comes back into the port, before you go and you shop for your goods and supplies the 2nd time around, you have to then actually shuffle this deck of tiles. So it's actually going to be the exact same tiles that you see on the board right now, but this time around they're going to be in a slightly different order. You just randomly shuffle them up and then you place these tiles out. And so that changes things up quite a bit. For example, this time around, right out of the chute, the 3rd tile that we placed is the Golden Hind tile. Round 1, the Golden Hind is the 2nd to the last tile. So you see how things change and strategy changes a little bit as you shuffle the tiles and replace them for rounds 2 and rounds 3. The die that we mentioned stays with the tavern, so you move it over to where the tavern is now located on this street. And the players would again, let's say this time they came back to port in this order, so then you would start with Blue going first, jumping as far ahead as he wants on this track, but just knowing that he can never go backwards once he's passed up an item. So Blue would go first, then green, then yellow, then red. Then you would go into the sailing portion. As you came back to port, you would actually pull these tiles up, shuffle them, and then replace them for the 3rd and final time through. Some of the additional items in the box that we're not going to see right now, depending on the number of players, for your 4 players you want to use these blue, this same colored blue tiles. But if you were to play with 5 players, then you would want to go up to the golden tiles or the light blue tiles. So each of these is going to come with 3 different sets of tiles. The only thing you have to remember there is you just use 1 set of tiles, but it depends on how many players you have. Either 3, 4, or 5 is going to tell you which deck of tiles you need to shuffle. But that's the basic setup there. That shows you how the board sets up, the supply board gets laid out, all the different parts and pieces, where they go, where they belong. So as you're moving along the street, gathering your items, you're going to be pulling them off of this board, off the main supply board, and putting them onto your smaller board that has symbols that match up with all the different tiles that you have here on the board. So if you, for example, pulled the Informer tile, you would take it off of the main board, put it onto your character's board, and now you get the benefit that that Informer gives you when you go to sail. So that basically gives you your setup of Francis Drake. I think at this point really the best thing would be for us to play around and let you guys see what that looks like. Thanks for checking it out.